Today's episode of On the Move is sponsored by Holly Hill Transport, transportation solutions for equine athletes. Holly Hill Transport is one of the nation's premier horse transportation companies with offices in the Northeast and Florida. They primarily serve the transportation needs of the nation's top sport horse barns, as well as providing service for farm moves and single horse shipments. Their mission is to provide excellence in horse transportation and always give the horse a good experience. Holly Hill Transport is looking to add a few new team members to their Class A CDL driving team. If you have experience with horses, an interest in the horse industry, a Class A CDL, and a positive attitude, they would love to talk to you. They are celebrating their 25th year in business and are looking to move forward with the kind of people who share their goals and values. To learn more about Holly Hill Transport and what they have to offer, please visit their website at hollyhilltransport.com/job opportunities. You can look for that link in the show description below. And now, here's the show. All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of On the Move. I am your host, Joe McDonald, and joining me today is Charlie Venezia of Holly Horse Transport. Charlie works for Holly Horse Transport. They specialize in transporting horses mainly in the hunter jumper world up and down the East Coast. He resides in Massachusetts for parts of the year, but we're sitting here talking at the end of March, and it looks like he's hanging out under the awning of a camper in South Florida, which looks very pleasant right now compared to where I'm at. So, how
Yeah,
are you
it,
today,
it's
Charlie?
it's um it's a pretty neat place to be. It's although I would take a 50-degree day with not too much wind and no rain over some of these 90-degree days we're starting to get. But
Wow,
yeah,
really? Already?
yeah. I mean, we get so the humidities can get really high here, so even if it's only in the 80s, it just seems really hot. But this is one of
Hmm.
those places like parts of December, January, and February are just so nice that you kind of forget the rest of it because I'll work out of here basically until June when we move north for the year.
Okay.
So I'm
When will
November
you
to
go
June,
down in the fall?
like November. We
Okay.
wanted we were trying to wait and install as long as we could, but we kind of got froze out of where we keep our horses in the summer. We actually keep our horses in Vermont. My wife lives in Vermont, and then I commute back and forth to Massachusetts to run the business and to drive, etc. So
Okay.
yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah. Do you for those listening, do you want to kind of give the quick elevator pitch of Holly Horse Transport and
Yeah,
kind of
it's yeah,
explain better what you guys do?
yeah. It's, Holly Hill Transport is the business I started right out of college, and we're a commercial horse shipper. So basically, our primary customers are hunter jumper farms that have too many horses to ship themselves. We're like I've been trying to think of a succinct way to explain exactly what we do to people who may not be familiar with our niche industry, and kind of like roadies, like the truck drivers that haul the Jimmy Buffett tour around. We're more like that than maybe the gooseneck outfit that you might hire to move a horse from point to point that you found off the internet. Um, we're licensed and insured motor carrier, primarily operating tractor trailers. Mostly what we do is really seasonally dependent. I guess it's kind of easy to start in January, and January usually finds us finishing up the people that are making a southern migration from the Northeast to Florida. Um, we trickle horses in and out of Florida all winter for these circuits like the Winter Equestrian Festival or Wellington International, whatever they call it now, hits the World Equestrian Center, and just snowbirds. We do a lot of snowbirds too that just come down for the winter to escape snow and so on and so forth. And then when those circuits end and things start to get nice up north, like basically our big migration north started on Sunday. We'll do like 6 loads this week out of Florida, and it just sort of picks up and goes from there through usually just the way things have gone the last 10 years, people stay longer and longer. So we're down here every month throughout the year, but we'll start to slow down in May and then really kind of get quiet by June. And then by that time, the horse shows that we go to in the spring and summer are in full swing. Um, yeah, does that kind of give you a little bit of insight? Maybe you could see if I'm
Yeah,
on the right
no,
track to answering those
no,
questions.
100%. 100%. And that's, I think it's easy for people who, well, I would say I was a little bit in both worlds growing up, but there's a lot of people who like they have horses and horses are a seasonal thing for them. And it's like the horses have the winter off, and then we get to go and do our local show series from like April to October, and there's some kind of finals in October. And then horses are like, you're done for the year. And there's like a lot of the United States where that's their relationship with horses.
Yep.
And so when you go to some place like where you listed, Ocala, Wellington, something like that, um, where it's a snowbird effect, right? So people are kind of anywhere in the summertime. There's a whole bunch of places they could be in the summertime. And then depending on the discipline, I mean, out west, a ton of people go to Arizona in the winter, right?
Yep.
In the east, everyone goes to Florida in the winter, and it gets concentrated. There's a whole ecosystem and industry around just these people picking up, moving, and going here. And now this is where all the activity is for the winter.
Yep.
And until you actually go to a place like WEC or WEF or HITS, which are all acronyms for those who aren't familiar, they're basically just different horse show series. Until you go to one of those places, you don't really realize how big that ecosystem is and the industry that's behind it. So it's like you guys, all the guys who have all these campers that most of these people live in throughout the winter,
Yep.
all the services that what happens when an influx of horses comes to a place like Ocala, Florida or Wellington, Florida. And like now there's all these extra goods and services that are going to be needed for a seasonal time. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to get you on the show, is because I think you could be in the horse world as a whole for a long time and not realize the scale to which these big seasonal migrations have an impact on the industry.
Yeah, I take it for granted. I mean, I was born into this, not into my job, but into a family of transient horse people. I mean, my family had has and has had a farm in Massachusetts since the 60s, and they started coming to South Florida. I think really coming to South Florida to show since before the Winter Equestrian Festival existed in 78. So I've always come down here, and I took it for granted that people might not know that this exists. And I think part of the reason I ended up doing the job I did was I wanted to remain in that industry, and it was a
Mm-hmm.
way for me to do so kind of on the terms that I wanted, and in a field that I could be good at. So
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd love to dive in and just kind of talk with you a little more. Can you kind of start at the beginning? Obviously, it sounds like you were raised in horses. Were they kind of not even an option in your family, or was it
well,
something you
it-
showed
that's
an affinity for?
that's a good question, and it's kind of a loaded question because I, to, you know they were definitely an option for me. Um, but I've always loved horses, and I've always loved being around horses, and I love to ride. My sister definitely followed more of the hunter jumper career path. She's a trainer in a big, I think she has her big R judge's card, and just lives and breathes it every day. When I was a little kid, I'm talking like 5 years old. Um, I can remember riding, and my parents, well, not my parents, but my mom. My mom has three sisters. They dressed me up in joffers and those funny little leather straps that go below your knees. And would, get a riding lesson, and kind of traditional English riding lesson, the stuff you do back. I don't know if they still do it, but I just remember I also grew up watching westerns, and I'm like, "Yeah, this doesn't work. Like, I can't do this. I I'm a cowboy. Like, I don't want to dress like this." So I didn't stick with the hunter jumper side of things as a kid or a young adult. So horses were more elective for me, and even though they are so serious in what they do, they did their best to accommodate my interests. And given the part of the world that we grew up in, how difficult pursuing those interests might have been. But I would say for me, it was fairly optional. When I was a teenager, I went on the road grooming for them, kind of grooming, and when I got my driver's license, driving family truck and trailer, and still on that barn management stuff, and so it started to become less optional at that point, probably because I was fairly good at it, and big strong kid, strong back, weak mind, as I like to think, and got to be fairly integral in their program from the mid '90s until I got out of college, and yeah, so in some ways it was optional, some ways it was somewhat. I don't want to say it was required, but it definitely was just a part of life. So
Sure. Well, and I think that's another thing people don't realize is, it's tough because it's got to be the right situation. Because there's definitely places out there where you're just, if you're going to be a groom or a barn manager or whatever it is, um, you can 100% just kind of get worked to death and taken advantage of. Now, you're in a unique situation. You're working for your family. So that might have
yeah,
happened more or
tying has
less
been
than
awesome.
average. Yeah. Um, but it does take like it's not just kind of like minimum wage skill set for someone to really be good at that job. And
Yeah,
I think a lot of people don't realize that. Like there are so many things that go into it. I think about um, who I've got working in my barn right now, and it's like, man, between the skills they already came with, plus what the time, we've spent investing in them, trying to teach them and get them,
cultivating
like,
that.
they're just so capable now, but it's
Yeah.
a big skill set.
It's just, growing up, my dad always told me you got to pay attention to the little details. And being in a show horse program, a hunter jumper program as a kid, and being responsible for so much, it made me so attentive to so many little details. I mean, 20 horses on the road, and there's just a lot of stuff to keep track of. And I think I started with them when I was around 15, and definitely that definitely helped set the stage for me to basically kind of keep that detail oriented frame of mind going
Mhm,
into doing a different career, and running a
mhm.
business, and sort of yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Well, whether it's your groom, your barn manager, and now your horse shipper, right? Like, that's 100% the person you want to be detail oriented,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
it's the same as your mechanic or your doctor. Like it's someone who you're getting them to do a service, but you're relying on them in a vital way, right? Like if I'm a horse trainer and I'm hiring someone to ship all my horses, it's like, okay, well let me load my entire livelihood up onto your truck, Charlie, and
Yep.
then I hope the next couple thousand miles are going to be good to
Well,
you.
and I'm glad you mentioned that, because this, as I was sort of having this conversation with you in my head for the past couple days, I think one of the things that I got really lucky with before I started my business was being on like the demand side of the equation before I got to the supply side, because I know what it's like. I mean, my dad never worked in the family business. He's a veterinarian, but like I knew what it was like to just, it had to go right, and you were counting on somebody
Mhm,
else, kind of putting your livelihood in their hands, because frankly, if you take enough of your good horses to a horse show and something happens along the way or at the show, it can script your whole season. It may mean your mortgage isn't getting paid at some point, and
mhm,
that's a big deal. So it's a lot of responsibility, and I've always tried to keep that at the forefront of my mind when basically running my business because like you're saying, you're putting a lot in our hands and it's important.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think if you're gonna be a business owner, the most one of the most valuable things you can do is continue to put yourself into the shoes of the client,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And so, like for me, I've been fortunate enough at our business. My wife and I, we're finally at the chance, like we've had the chance to buy weanlings, buy yearlings, buy young horses, and develop them, right?
Mhm.
And it's kind of a different podcast, but in the beginning, as a horse trainer, if you're trying to do a value added flip, for lack of a better word, on a horse, you kind of buy a current existing riding horse, improve it in some way, maybe show it a little bit or whatever, and then you sell it. But it is a bigger upfront investment to get something young that you can develop from weanling or yearling and then bring it along slowly like we have. So now I've finally had the chance to like raise some of these babies, right? And now I'm at the point where it's time for me to start them. And I feel good about that, but for me as my business, I can understand how it would be really hard. Someone's had this thing for a year and a half or however long they've had it since they bought this colt, and it's been sitting in the backyard or whatever. And now it's time to send it to the colt starter. I try to always appreciate how much they've invested in that, both financially and emotionally, to where now this is the next step. And to them, a lot is riding on this. Where for me, not that it's unimportant, but it's like, oh, well, this is just like I get up and go to work and I get the next colt started and we just go and we
Yeah.
do it every day. Do you have a horse or ag related business? On the Move has a truly global audience that reaches listeners from every corner of the horse world. We are currently looking for sponsors to run advertisements for on the show. If you'd like to get involved, you can reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, or email us at theonthemovepodcast@gmail.com. And now, here's the show.
Yeah. And I think in my business, it's pretty easy to fall into that sort of that latter frame of mind that you mentioned, but it's it is really important to remember. Like I think of it as my own horses because since I met my wife and time has passed, we've started to accumulate horses, and I would be extremely cautious about with whom I sent them, ship them with
Mm-hmm.
because of how important it is and how much you have vested in whether you're going to think of it more on the financial side or the emotional side. Either way, it's a big deal, and that peace of mind that you need to be able to have in somebody else's aptitude and ability is important. It's a big deal, and it's definitely what motivates me to just continue to do a good job, to try to continually improve our service. We're in an industry that really hasn't seen a lot of change in a long time, and that's okay because there's not a lot of need to evolve it. It's kind of one of those things like horse training's been around since the dawn of time, we'll call it, and everything's already been done. So there's things to improve on, and there's things that better just leave alone. But you still need to be careful about not getting. Oh, I'm kind of finding a little bit of a loss for words when I'm trying to explain, but
You can get complacent
yeah,
really
really
easily.
easy. Yeah, really
Mm-hmm.
easy, and I'm sure you can relate to this with having employees. Is it's also important to convey that sense to the people that you work with because
Mm-hmm.
their actions are just as important as yours in like the day to day,
Yeah.
and keeping everything going correctly, kind of upholding those
Yeah.
standards and that you want for people.
Yeah. 1000%. 1000%. Because like I try to be very upfront with my help about, you know, here's this horse, this is their owner, this is their goals for this horse, this is why this horse is important to them. And because I get a lot of situations where it's like either the horse or the person is kind of uh like it's kind of their last hurrah, right? It's like there's been sometimes, and I try to not have as many of these horses in the barn, but it does happen from time to time where it's like you're the third or fourth colt starter to get them, right?
Oh,
And and so it's like, look, we need to do a good job because realistically, no one's going to invest in this horse anymore after they've invested in us.
yeah.
So if there isn't a good job here, it's probably close to the end of the road for this guy. And likewise, I get a lot of horses that are like, "Hey, this person's one shot." Like they've been working their whole life. They're 50 something, 60 something now, and like this is the first really nice horse they've ever had, and they've told me it's probably going to be the only really nice horse they're ever going to be able to afford. So like that's what's in our hands right now. So just keep that in mind, when you go to catch them or you're grooming them or you're feeding them in the morning and they're not like you're like, oh, I should take a minute to fix this up. Like take the minute to fix it up, you know?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I think in part you're talking about sort of like it's like an accountability thing is you have to identify what the situation you're in and also realize that it's kind of more important than you. It's what you're doing for somebody else, whether it's the horse or the customer. It's kind of more important than whatever you've got going on in your day or between your ears or whatever. It's my dad used to say it's not a matter of life or death. It's more important than that. And especially like in your position, I'm glad I'm not in it where you might be the last stop in the road or on the road to whatever a horse that basically has fallen through the cracks, I guess you could say, or has had some problems along the
Hmm.
way, or again the responsibility of someone who maybe has one shot to do something with a horse that they financially may never be able to get again, and it needs to go right for them. And it's good that you're taking responsibility and identifying that. And I'd like to think the same thing because with our business, if someone might pinch pennies to go to Florida for the winter, and if we don't do a good job or we don't give it our all to get that horse down the road to its destination where it can walk off happy, safe, and healthy, so it can do whatever that customer has planned for the winter. I mean, it's on us, and it's. I think sometimes that gets overlooked in my industry, but it's really important.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Well, and it literally is like, trucking or anything like that. Like obviously you guys do a good job, but it's a function of volume to some extent, right? Like
yeah,
we
absolutely, yeah,
so that's the hard balance point. And I mean, I'm no different. It's like if I ride more horses and I start more colts, I get more checks written to me.
yeah.
Now, eventually you hit like a balance point where I do that more. Either I'm going to burn out or I'm not going to do as good a job as I would or some combination of both. And it's the same with you guys. So you got to tote that line.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think it's about quality control and this is the 25th year I'm in business. I'm lucky to still be in business after 25 years. I think my business could be bigger if I really wanted it to, but like at the end of the day, that we're only as good as our last job. So we better make sure every job we do
Mm.
is good. It's as good as the last job. With a new customer, it's going to be the only shot you get. You like heard it said, you only get one chance to make a first impression. But it, yeah, for us, it's about quality control and it circles back to that little details thing. If you can stick to those little details and keep them keep keep doing them, it just
Right.
makes life a lot easier.
For sure. For sure. And that's for anything, not
Yeah,
just horse shipping.
I think
Um,
maybe you'll understand this. Your business, my business, owning a gutter installation company, they're all the same in a lot of ways because the fundamental things that will bring success to anybody in business are basically similar. You know, certain businesses are easier
Mhm.
to grow. You know, the human capital is easier to develop, or you don't need it in other industries. But it's just kind of rules for life, right?
Yeah, 100%. Well, and I'll give you this is my perspective on it. And you know, I'm a Christian, and I really value the teachings of Christ and what I've learned in church and through the Bible and things like that. But I don't have like I could never be a preacher. Like I don't have that skill set. But what I do have is a passion and the skill set for me to run my horse business. And for me, I firmly believe that what I'm doing is the best way I can have a positive impact on the world right now.
Yeah,
And I think there's a lot of people out there that are good at what they do. And, you know, it's not that you're necessarily like a preacher or philanthropist or something like that. Like you're running a business, and yes, we've got to be sustainable. And yes, like we have to provide for our families and things like that. But if you keep the mindset of, I'm going to go use the gifts I've been given and do what I'm good at to make a positive impact on other people's lives, it it's basically like you don't really, if you have that attitude, pretty often don't have to worry about quality control because it just
yeah,
is
yeah.
natural.
Takes care of itself.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
No, I agree. I agree. I don't know if I have. I agree with you completely. I don't have a whole lot to add to that. Um, I don't know for sure, to go off on a tangent, that I followed the career path that might have been my best contribution to the world. But I'm in my mid 40s now, and I do love what I do. I do feel like, at the end of the day, every horse that walks on one of our trailers is some. I serve the horse in that way, as corny as it
Mhm.
sounds. And you know, I can remember being a kid. We would go to, in the hunter jumper world. There's like the indoor show circuit in the fall, kind of centers around, it's a finals. And I just remember seeing those horses, those equitation horses that would get, they travel so much, and get worked so much for these kids to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish, that a lot of times it seemed like, you know, they spent more time on the trailer than they did in the barn. And I just remember thinking that trailer ride had to be important, because it might be some of the only rest that horse gets. So in a kind of corny way, it's it that was one of the things that motivated me before I even started shivving horses, to do a good job, and to kind of treat those passengers as best I could, because that it might be some of the most relief they get in their day, you know. But
Mm, for sure. As someone who's been around the equitation world, I think you're 100% right on that because it's a hard road. And man, for creatures that are so willing to give 100% of themselves to whatever we ask from them,
yes,
uh, trying to set up every situation to make it enjoyable for them, it, I think it's really important. And that's something, the older I get, I think I appreciate that a lot more. Like even when I ship my own horses to a horse show, I am really trying to be detail oriented about that. And I think part of that might be because when I was 20 years old, traveling wasn't any big deal for me. And not that I think I'm super old or anything, but the older I get, the less I like to travel. Like I like going to the horse show, but I don't like hauling 8 hours to the horse show, you know?
yeah, no, and it's funny, when part of what drew me to the horse transportation business was how much I just like the adventure of, like, it's not an unknown, it's a known. I still like to travel. Being a horse shipper and traveling, you know, sometimes taking care of horses, and being responsible for them, and all that can take a little bit of the fun out of traveling, because you're working hard. whether it's making sure the place you stop has water, you didn't run out of water in your water buckets or your jugs, or trying to route around traffic, or deal with people who don't drive maybe the way you need them to as you're sharing the road. All stuff we don't have any control over. They can take a little bit of the fun out of it, but there's still an element of adventure to traveling that I still like to do after 25 years of doing this. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's cool. Oh, so let's get back to kind of the formative years. So it sounds like you spent your teenage years basically you're like a barn rat groom moving around, making sure that these horses for your family's business, like you're the pit crew,
yeah,
basically, for
yeah,
anyone not familiar with the show
yeah,
world.
exactly. So when I was a little kid, I rode with a reining horse trainer because I didn't want to ride English, so they found me a reining horse trainer to ride with, and kind of rode with him off and on. He actually, oddly enough, for a reining horse trainer, he had a farm right here in Wellington, and it was back when
Mm.
Wellington was a lot smaller. I promise I'm going somewhere with this. He, I really enjoyed it, but I remember going to the Quarter Horse Congress like in 1993 or 94 and walking around. He was showing there, and I was just starting to like hit puberty and notice girls, and I noticed there was just a lot. The ratio of women to men was pretty low, and I said to myself,
Mhm.
man, I can go to a jumper show, 100 jumper show, and it's like one guy for every 30 girls, and it's the opposite here. So I think it sort of stalled my interest in the Western world a little bit, and that's probably more than anything what drew me to work in horses as a younger guy. And then I got to
Mhm.
liking it, and did it every chance I could. I mean, I never liked school, but I always knew it was something I needed to do and to fulfill the best I could. And but every weekend during the show season in high school, summers, I was on the road. Into college, I would go home, whether it was back home to work the family farm, do whatever around the farm on the weekends or traveling. Where I went to school was kind of centrally located on the East Coast. Well, it wasn't centrally located on the East Coast, but I mean, I could get in my pickup and in 5 hours be in Upper Marlboro at Prince George's Equestrian Center to work there for the weekend, or Harrisburg, any of those places. Get on a plane to go to Florida to work for a long weekend, and then but I knew I needed to go to college, and I had always convinced myself that I needed to do something. Long story short, I went to college. I was biology pre med, and I can remember my first semester in biology. I mean, talk about hating school as a kid. I mean, I really hated that, and I just knew it
Yeah.
wasn't going to be something that I could could continue on with. So I changed my major. I kept my concentration in case I did want to go to medical school. I fulfilled those courses, but I ended up majoring in economics. And slowly, by about, I think, in between sophomore and junior year, I pretty much come to terms with the fact that I hadn't ruled out a final career, but I wanted to take a stab at horse transportation. And it's kind of foolish because the market was completely saturated. I mean, there's three or
Mm.
four well established horse carriers in Massachusetts, however many dozen in New England and New York, New Jersey, that it was definitely not an easy market to break into. I found a guy who had sort of recently closed down his shipping company, C&W, Chet West, C&W Horse Transportation, and I got him to sell me a trailer that wasn't really even roadworthy, but he sold me a trailer and he financed it for me. So the next like 18 months I spent rebuilding it myself. A buddy of mine and we pulled the floor out. We did everything we could with the tools we had, and I outsourced the repairs that I couldn't do myself as I could afford to do them. And basically, by the time I graduated from college, I'd managed to buy my first tractor, and I got my operating authority. Think think right around when I did my first job in June of 2001, and it's just I don't want to say I've never looked back, but that's sort of the beginnings of it. I definitely feel
So
like
what drew you to it?
well, I always liked trucks. I always enjoyed horse transportation. I always liked the one thing about the hunter jumper business, especially in the 90s growing up, was there was a big sense of community. And even though everybody might not like everybody, there was a really good sense of community, and I think part of what drew me to it was a desire to stay in that little microcosm, and
Mm,
and
mhm.
and I didn't want to like it'd be like going off into the real world. I guess I never really went into the real world, and like I like to joke, I've never had a real job, but part of it was that was just I wanted to stay in the horse business. I didn't stick with the with training at all as a kid, so I being a horse trainer wasn't an option. Working for my family was great as a groom and a barn manager, but I knew it wasn't sustainable continuing on. I knew I could work for them at a certain point in my life, but never really work with them as a partner. So, and I always loved the trucks. Horse shippers, they pull in the show, and it was always kind of a big deal. Big shiny truck pulls in, and just it was something I was drawn to. I rode in those trucks as a kid. Whether it was going to a day show, riding the semi, so that way when we got somewhere, somebody was there to take the horses off, or going to an away show, get there so somebody could bed the stalls. Before I had my driver's license, 13, 14, 15-year-old kid, I rode with the van driver, and I got to know a lot of those people and liked them, and I liked being a part of that community. And back then, the horse van drivers back then were really, there was a lot of sense of like that, like camaraderie, for lack of a better term. One driver would help the other
Mm.
get unloaded so they could move to get out of the way so that the next truck could pull in, and it was definitely a familial sense that partly drew me in. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. That makes sense because I spent a little time after college in the real world. It was terrible. Uh, went back to horses and wish I had the wisdom that you had, at least from that perspective when you were in college. Because, yeah, I was thinking I needed to go out into the world and get a real job.
Well,
And,
not to
oh,
inter-
that was terrible.
not to interrupt you, but having a father, like my dad's a veterinarian, and back where I grew up, yeah, I grew up on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, and it's a pretty small world back then. And my dad was a little bit of a larger than life guy. We couldn't really go anywhere without somebody saying hello to him, a client of his, and I kind of felt like I needed to go along that path. His shoes were too big for me to ever think I could fill as a vet. So I think maybe I convinced myself that I would follow something similar, but not exactly the same. But yeah, it got to the point where in college I realized it just wasn't going to be tenable. I wouldn't call myself a smart guy, but I've always been able to, if I could give something my whole attention, I could always excel at it and remember things. And so I don't think it would have been too difficult to pursue that other career path. But yeah, I am lucky that, well, getting off track here, but
Yeah, well, 100%, man. I mean, I envy anyone who, and you might not have even known it at the time, right? You're just kind of like reacting like, well, now I'm going to get the horse trailer I got to spend a year and a half rebuilding and
yeah.
stuff like that. So you might not have felt that way at the time, but it's I think it's pretty cool when people have that much direction at that age.
Well,
Because it's tough to kind of bounce around in your 20s and not that you're never going to be fully certain of anything, but to take take a long time to find your calling, so to speak.
yeah, and everybody, when I first told my family that I wanted to go into horse transportation, and rather than continue my education, after college, everybody said, "Don't worry, he'll stick with it for a year or two, and he'll get it out of his system." And I think even my dad figured out, this is just a phase. But yeah, it wasn't. But I feel like I had a point with this where I was going with this. Um, Now I don't remember what it was. The This happens a lot when you get to be my age.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. So, yeah, talk to me. Like, what is the level of premeditation here? Like, are we putting together a business plan and figuring out what we need to do to be
So,
viable, or are we just
so
buying a truck and trailer
yeah,
and seeing
no.
what happens?
Everybody used to tell me, "Oh, you got to have a business plan." Like, what's a business plan? Like, I didn't know what a business plan was. I knew that I knew the job. I would definitely recommend anybody that goes into any business getting experience in that business before they jump in with both feet. So I'm a little bit, uh, it's a little bit like arrogant for me to say, you know, it was a little bit arrogant for me to think that I could go into the horse transportation business without never actually having worked in it. But I also knew enough about it from being on the receiving end of that service that, and it was a relatively profitable enough business to be in. And my expenses were, with the exception of a truck and trailer. I mean, I'm a kid just out of college. I lived over my mom's garage. My pickup was paid for. Like I didn't have any expenses. So I knew that as
Hmm.
long as I could stay busy, I could stay alive. So
Yeah.
there wasn't a lot.
That's honestly a perfect time to start a business. Like
Yeah,
for
and
for
I think,
anyone listening who's at that point in life, like now's the time to go for it if you're in that
well,
situation.
I think it's important, and this is something I thought of about talking with you. Is any? I think people go into business for themselves for a lot of different reasons, and many times those reasons may not be the right ones. And I think if you're gonna do something, if you're gonna do something as your own employer, you need to be prepared to have it consume you. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I mean you need to be prepared to give it your all. And like you're saying, when you're a young person, that is the perfect time to do it because you probably don't have, there's nothing wrong with it if you do have, but you probably don't have the things in your life that also require and demand and to which you should be giving your time, like a family. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So yeah, I was very lucky that I could kind of eat, sleep, and breathe. And to kind of get back to what I was trying to say earlier about school, anything that interested me enough that I could eat, sleep, and breathe it, I knew I could be good at because what I'd done in the past, whether it was something small or something bigger, as long as it had that pull on me, I didn't have to worry about it. It's going to take care of itself.
Hmm.
So, which isn't to say
Yeah.
that the first 9 years, 8 or 9 years of being in business weren't an incredible struggle, but it's kind of like that. You hear about like an overnight music sensation, I'm sure you've heard of that, but you realize like, yeah, they've been playing bars for 10 years, and
Yeah.
and struggling and just I hate to use that cliche of grinding, but yeah, I mean that's what it is. It's what it's all about.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, the anytime I'm like getting down about anything going on, so this will come out a little later, but for you and me, it'll be tomorrow. Tomorrow will be 4 years full time horse training for
Oh, cool.
me. I
Congratulations.
had several years of like part time and kind of slowly transitioning to making the leap to be totally financially dependent on the business I run now. Um, but it's one of those things where if I'm getting down on that, I'm just like, you just need to get to the next at bat, right? Like
Yeah.
in terms of like you're gonna strike out a lot, and you know what? People people don't remember when you strike out if you just hit a couple home runs every now and then. That's what people remember.
Yeah, and being in business, regardless of what business that is, you're gonna strike out so much. And thankfully, there's no like I don't know baseball that well. I've never been a big baseball fan, so I can't use that as an example. But thankfully, there's no limit to the amount of times you can get up at bat,
Yeah,
and just keep
100%.
swinging and just try to keep your chin up and keep going. Life, like I can't tell you how many times that quitting would have been a way easier option, but there was just something in me that keep swinging, regardless of the pitch, to keep
Yeah.
swinging.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I had someone tell me once, and this was really good advice for me because I'm starting to get into the show world more. Um, and it's like, man, you can think you're kicking ass, and then you get humbled so quickly the very next weekend or whatever it is. But he said, "Look, here's winning at the horse show. You get to go to the next horse show, right? Like, you just have to think about what are we gonna do to how are we gonna get to the next one? Like, if we still got the clients in the barn and we got the horses and we keep keep the trucks rolling and we can get to the next one. Like that's winning because he said over the years you'll have really good years or really good weeks or whatever, and people be like, oh yeah, back in whatever year he won the blah blah blah, right? And then after it's over, it's like everyone just cares about the next horse show anyway,
Yeah.
right? So just worry about getting to the next one, and the highs and lows will take care of himself. Um, and he, the other thing he said that really made me laugh was talking about the Quarter Horse Congress. He was like, "Man, back in the day when I was a young trainer, they said if you could leave the Congress with your trailer and your wife, you had a good Quarter Horse Congress."
Yeah. I think the guy I grew up riding with would have thought about the same way and probably said
Yeah,
something similar. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
But that is it, man. Like if you focus on the consistency, the results will eventually take care of themselves. But it's just
Yeah.
so hard to remain consistent in the beginning because you're gonna keep striking out.
Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna go off on some tangents here in our conversation, but my dad used to he introduced me to some philosophies growing up and into my young adult life that really helped carry me through. And one of them, have you ever heard of a basketball coach named John Wooden?
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
he had me read John Wooden's books, and that's what it seemed like coach's philosophy was all about was you know uh, was what you're talking about, and if you can stick with those fundamentals and that consistency, and it would carry you through. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, 100%. So, well, okay, so you're young, you got a fire in your belly. You're like, I'm gonna get the trailer, fix it up. You got the tractor by the time you're
yeah.
done with uh done with college. How are you, as we alluded to in the beginning, people people really need to be able to trust their horse transportation. So, how are you presenting yourself? Obviously, you're already connected within the industry. I assume you knew people. Like, what's your lead generation, for lack of a better term?
That's a good question, and it's probably one that I did a horrible job at for the first 8 or 9 years I was in business. I knew so many people, and they'd seen me as a kid growing up in the industry, but I just assumed people would s would see me in the horse transportation business and know that I would apply that same work ethic and accountability and all that I had as I worked for my family to my new career, and somewhat surprised that it didn't really work out that way. So, and I'm also the kind of person, I believe in earning work, not soliciting work. So I was never great at soliciting business from people to grow my business. I always kind of, I- I'm not going to say I lacked the self confidence because I was always very confident in the job I did, but it's a little
Hmm.
bit of that like fear of rejection when you put yourself out there, especially to people that you've grown up around, to solicit their work if they chose not to use me. So my growth at the beginning was pretty slow. I got my first truck and trailer on the road, first semi on the road in 2001. I had a gooseneck and pickup as well. I got another truck and trailer on the road right at the end of 2004, but it still was a slow process. And partly what I did was try to network better with other horse shippers to work for them. So it's quite common in our industry when a carrier has too much work to have them sub out to another carrier. So for
Hmm.
example, like tomorrow we load a couple of loads out of Wellington. There we don't actually work for the trainer. We're working for the other horse shipper. So because that horse shipper isn't able to cover however many loads he has that day. But that's how I did that. That was partly how I grew at the beginning. And just to go off on a tangent, my family's been in the horse business so long, and I named my shipping company sort of after their farm name, thinking it would. I always like the ring of it. My last name's not that easy to pronounce if you don't know me or haven't heard me pronounce it, so it didn't have a good ring to it. But I didn't realize that a lot of people would think that uh, my family owned the truck or trucks, not me. And
Mm.
and that was a bit of a barrier to growth at the start because, like any competitive sport, horses, it can be a little locally, it can be a little tough where one trainer might not use another service because, like, maybe this is a poor analogy, but somebody might not use a certain farrier because they shoe another barn that they're really tight in competition with. So it was tough, but I think it worked out in the end because maybe it allowed me to meter my growth in a way that kept the quality control and the accountability that we talked
Mm,
about earlier. But that was to get that was kind of the first few years was I stayed afloat and I did plenty of work, stayed alive, but it didn't really thrive at the start. And can't really tell you where that tipping point happened. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that recession we had, that big crash like in 2008. But
yep.
when we came out of that, there were some younger trainers who had started up in New England that I was able to work for and kind of earn a spot. And I still work for them. That thankfully that I got their business back then, I earned their business back then, and that we've been able to keep it. So that's how we've grown. I've never been a good salesman. I've always been someone confident in my ability to sell, let the product sell itself. But horse transportation is one of those things that you have to do the job for people to see the work. So
Right.
you got to get the work first, and it's hard to get people to convinced to use.
Hmm.
It was hard to get people convinced to use my service when I didn't necessarily have that gift of gab. Like there's another one of my competitors, much larger company and older than me. I used to marvel at his ability to kind of to sell himself before he sold his service or before he had the opportunity to prove his service. And I tried to mimic some of that a little bit, but ultimately it's just not who I am. So it's been a slower grind. It's been a slower climb. I hope that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. No, it totally makes sense because it's one of those things. All right, my house that I'm sitting in. When I bought this house, I had to get a new roof. Right. So got the new roof, and you know what the roofers did? They put a sign in my yard that's like, "This is the roofing company, and we just did this roof."
Yeah.
Right. And then everybody in my neighborhood can l- drive by and be like, "Oh, look, there's the roof that they did.
Yeah.
They look like they did a good job on that roof."
Yeah.
And you don't have that like physical thing to show them, right? Like that to me that's kind of what you're saying is you you have to have the person kind of experience your service firsthand before they're really bought in on, "Oh,
Yeah.
I
And,
am
and,
getting a
and
good product."
what I was talking about earlier with naming my business after my family's farm, I think a lot of people at the start just thought it was my family's truck hauling just my family's horses. And it took a while to get that that notion out there that sort of basically the fact that I am for hire, have truck, will travel. We
Mhm.
work for anybody, and yeah, I,
Well, and I could see what you were saying too. Um, I don't really know anything about automotive racing, but I reference it sometimes when I have to explain uh when I kind of explain like the horse industry to non-horse people because there are a lot of parallels, especially in the show world.
yeah,
So like if you're Ferrari and I'm Red Bull and like I'm competing in Formula 1 and we got to get to Monaco or whatever, and Red Bull also has like Red Bull car transportation not related with the
yeah,
Red Bull racing team, like I'm still not going to use that
yeah,
cuz I'm not
yeah.
going to be like, "Yeah, I hired those guys to get me to the track."
Exactly, exactly. And
You know?
and I guess with the analogy that you just made, I'm lucky I have any business at this point besides my family's farm. But yeah, no, that's exactly the case. But I think the advantage that it's not one of the advantages that I had, and one of the things that I've really worked hard to do is ultimately my job is horse transportation. But even more fundamentally than that, I think for your listeners who may not be familiar with the hunter jumper industry in general and the dressage world and all that, that trainers are really the core of our customers. Like keeping trainers happy and getting things done for them are really who they're the decision makers and they're who keep us afloat. So I think of my job more than being in horse transportation is making trainers' lives easier. It's my job to
Mhm.
make a trainer's life easier because they're outsourcing something that they can't or don't want to do. And And as long as I can keep doing that and doing it well, then I'll be able to continue successfully. But no,
Right.
your car racing analogy is a good one.
Yeah. Well, and as a trainer, I appreciate what you're saying because, when someone sends me a horse, especially in like the show horse situation, if you send a horse to a trainer, a lot of times how I view it is okay, I'm an owner of a horse and I want to play in this world, right? Like I want to be able to have the horse, or maybe I'm an amateur that's going to compete, but I am hiring the trainer to be like, hey, in this world, in this sphere of competition, and all these things that go with operating in the horse world, I'm not as educated as you, the trainer I'm hiring. So I'm entrusting you, the trainer, to steer me in the right direction when it comes to what horse shows should I go to? What kind of training does my horse get? Who should be shoeing my horse? What veterinarian should be working on my horse? Who should be transporting my horse? All these things that the owner is entrusting to the trainer to help them navigate, right? And even though the trainer might not be doing all those things, the trainer is more or less a consultant for let me guide you through this thing we've built called the horse world and put you and your horse in the best position to be happy and successful. And so to me, that's a lot of pressure on a trainer. And when you have people like you, a transportation company that can be relied upon, and it's like, all we got to do is just call Charlie and then it gets handled. That means I can keep up my end of the bargain to an owner.
Yeah, and as the son and nephew of a family of horse trainers, brother to a horse trainer, I know what I'd like to think I know some of the struggles that trainers go through because part of the reason I never wanted to get into that side of the business was I don't ever want to get a text message at 10 p.m. that, Susie's just decided that, you know, Susie, I say Susie, like a parent texting the trainer late at night, hey, we're basically going to arrive with somebody else. And I know those
Uh-huh.
things happen and I know how hard that is. And because I know what trainers put into their students and how much effort. And I also know what it's like when a trainer books a truck to go to a show with, say, 8 horses, and the day before the show, you've already priced everything. You as a trainer have done budgets depending on the demographic of your clientele. You've maybe done budgets for everything. People are expecting to spend a certain amount. So when the shipper shows up or the day before you call the shipper and they're like, hey, I'm down to six. What can we do? I know what it's like to have to be in that middle where you're kind of pulled between the shipper saying, well, it's the same price whether I take six or eight, and then having to explain to the rest of the customers that, hey, the
Mhm.
price is going up, and then you may lose two more. So now you're down to four. So I think I was able to, I probably did it at a loss quite a bit, try to make trainers' lives a little easier by knowing that, like, I read a bumper sticker. I was going down 95 one day. Um, we will always do good work at a profit if we can, at a loss if we must, but always good work. And that's kind of been part of one of my philosophies is ultimately as a trainer, if I'm working for you, I need to make sure that you remain solvent so that I can remain solvent. And it's a give and take,
Mhm.
and not
Yep.
only am I responsible for the horses that you're sending with me, but I got to work with you to help you grow, just maintain your business, never mind grow it. So,
Yeah.
a little bit of a cog in that gear or tooth in that gear, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. That makes sense because we again, I think any business owner is going to be in that situation where, um, so it's kind of like the goose and the golden egg, right? Like the trainer is your goose. Like that's where you get the business, and the business is going good. But if you can't work with them at all, eventually you'll kill the goose, and then the golden eggs will stop coming, right?
Yeah, it's a good analogy. Yeah, for sure. For sure. But
So looking at longevity and sustainability of an industry, you got to remember that when you're dealing with long-term clients.
yeah, and it's important, I think, for people that may be unfamiliar with horse transportation is in my industry is I don't want to give anybody the impression that we only ship for trainers. We do a lot of single horse shipments. We do a lot of, you know, uh, people who really aren't horse people. They might be a horse owner, but they're not a horse person. But ultimately, like any business, repeat business is what allows you to survive. You know, any
Mhm.
business that's constantly relying on new clientele, that's a really tough business model. So, like what you're saying is trainers are our repeat business, and trying to see them through is important to me.
Mhm. That's awesome. Uh, so I heard you mention you said you got your first truck on the road in 2001, you got a second one on the road in 2004. So in the beginning, I'm assuming it's like just you, right? Like
So
it's
yeah,
Charlie, and Charlie will go to up and down the road if you call him and write him a check.
so thankfully I had enough of a network of people who were willing to be available, and it was never enough, but I had enough people who would help me on a part-time basis that I could keep that second truck going, whether it was the gooseneck or the semi or both, that they were at least able to pay for themselves. And it allowed me to grow enough that when the economy started to lose some traction in whatever it was 2008 or whatever it was, one of my part-time guys, he was my closest friend since I was 15 as well. I grew up working together. He groomed part-time. He worked in my uncle's construction company. He actually came on working for me full time. And that was when we started to get some traction because I was able to do more work and be less reliant. If somebody called and needed a truck that required two drivers, prior to having a full-time employee, before I could truly commit to that, especially if it was a job that would happen pretty quickly, like say you call me on a Wednesday for a Friday job, I couldn't commit to it really until I could find someone else to drive with me. But once I was able to have a full-time employee, I knew that I was much more viable, and then I was able to kind of continue to grow from there.
Yeah. Yeah, that so can you talk about that process a little bit? And I know that's we'll get to it, but you've part of your deal is you've been sponsoring this show looking for new drivers, but man, was that tough like the first time you sent someone that wasn't you in the driver's seat out to represent your brand?
Well, it was to a point with Chris was his name is his name that worked for me then, and he and I had grown up together, and I knew his skill set enough that I was 95% sure that he was going to do about as good a job as I was. So I slept pretty well, or I could have peace of mind. But yeah, absolutely, because I would get so obsessive back then about stuff that mattered. It does matter, but maybe I was being overly putting too much weight on certain little details that I didn't need to obsess over. So as I started to, it's kind of like a parent bubble wrapping their kid. You got to kind of let them go a little bit. You want to kind of,
Mhm.
you kind of watch them, and you kind of you you have to stand back a little and just see what happens, and give guidance where it's needed. But ultimately, if you're going to grow, you have to be able to trust other people. And the thing that I've found is just to find the best people that I can. And if I find the
Mhm.
best people that I can and train them to the best of my abilities, then that's the best I can do, really.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Uh, for sure. And there put it this way. It's one of those things like it's not easy to do well, but it's a lot of it's like an effort based thing, right? Like most there's a lot of things with horses that are where it's like you don't have to be a super athlete or you don't have to be one of the top 1% smartest people in the world. You just have to be very, very, like you said in the beginning, detail oriented and keep putting that effort forth consistently.
yeah,
Right? That to me is what makes a a good shipper or anyone that's going to be a steward of an animal. It's the effort never going away
yeah,
is what really separates the wheat from the chaff on that.
yeah. Yeah, they used to when I was in school in college, I took a class of business classes, and there was this phrase that has always stuck with me, and it was when companies who have a really successful product don't continue to try to cultivate and innovate, they get fat, dumb, and lazy. And it's pretty easy for a service provider like me, a company that provides a service, to get complacent with those little details and to get fat, dumb, and lazy. And I've seen it happen, and it's probably happened within my company here and there, and thankfully been able to catch it, you know. But
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah. So I'd really be curious because I mean, you said the industry is kind of the same, right? And and you start out and you get another truck, and I assume you just kind of go through. Like, can you talk a little bit about the growth of your company from maybe that like 2004 point till now, and how what were the growing pains behind that? Because I'm sure you got to a point where it was like any business owner, it's like, okay, now I have to balance working the business versus working on the business, right? Like, how many
yeah.
times is Charlie going to go down the road versus,
Well,
how is Charlie going to handle our operations and procedures and get new customers and yada, yada, yada?
yeah, no, to a certain extent, yes. Thankfully, I used to one of the things I used to really agonized over early on in the early 2000s was all this chatter that they were going to eliminate or basically make it so that we couldn't use cell phones while driving. Basically make it so you couldn't communicate while driving. And thankfully, in that this modern era we live in, even in the early 2000s, a lot of the things that I needed to do on the administrative side or whatever I could do from behind the wheel.
Hmm.
So it wasn't that big a deal. As far as growing pains, it's hard to explain. It's hard to really remember. Like it's been long enough. Getting my first office manager, I think in 2013 was a big step. It used to be me. Once I had started to gain some momentum and get some more employees, the business grew. So as the business grew, there was more paperwork to do. So it just meant I had to get in the office. I mean, I might be in the office from you know, after I got home at 8 PM to midnight doing invoicing or trucking is a fairly paperwork cumbersome business, filing fuel tax returns, highway use tax returns, apportion plate returns, like just stuff like
Oh
that.
man.
But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. I guess I've either got really lucky or it came really naturally that nothing sticks out in my mind as if you ask me a specific question, maybe it would, but I can't really.
Well, where did you? Okay, so I don't even, I didn't even know about those. I assume there's a lot of regulations with
Yeah.
truckings and things like that. How do you even sit down and go about like figuring that stuff out?
Well, that was so I did join at like one of those it was an association that handled a lot of permitting for me to get started, for a fee, kind of like an attorney based
Oh,
deal where
that's nice.
they got my paperwork rolling and then told me what I needed to do as far as that went. But I mean, there's really nobody paying attention to little things like, hey, what's that sticker on the front of that guy's truck? Oh, well, that sticker is for a permit that you really do need. You just haven't been caught without it yet, so you better get it before you
Yeah.
do. So stuff like that. I mean, yeah, there isn't a handbook on. There was never a handbook on. Here's the keys and all the components to being in the trucking business. And if there was, I didn't have it, but I
Hmm.
figured it out. And I
Yeah.
was lucky enough that I figured it out in time that before it became a problem. And don't get me wrong, there was times when I had to learn some mechanical stuff the really hard way and some administrative stuff the really hard way and some stuff dealing with customers that I had to learn the hard way or slightly painful way, that I was
Hmm.
able to grow from.
Yeah. Yeah. Do
So,
you have any like any good trucker on the road story? I mean, I'm sure you got a bunch, but like any that come to mind where it's
shoot.
like, man, I just can't believe this circus I've signed myself up for.
I mean, I've had to nearly assist in CPR of a morbidly obese woman in Sumter, South Carolina at 3 a.m. Just random stuff. Been on first on the scene on accidents where people didn't survive. Um,
Mm.
eh, Candidly, if I'd have thought of that question that you might ask me beforehand, I might have been able to dig unpack some of those memories to tell you some good stories. But nothing really, nothing great and riveting to entertain anybody.
Yeah. No, no horses put you like 2 hours behind schedule because they
Oh,
won't get on a trailer or
I could
whatever.
go on for hours about that, and no, for sure. I mean, horses that didn't wanna load, having unmanageable expectations from people that just expected more out of. I think there is a group of people who hire horse transportation as a service that think that everybody that rolls up is gonna be the guy from the Horse Whisperer movie and has
Yeah.
all these tricks in their bag, these tools in their toolbox to get their horse on the trailer, and don't get me wrong, being around horses all my life and understanding a little bit more gives me an advantage, but you're hiring a service to get your horse from point A to point B. You're not hiring someone to train your horse to get on the truck. So
Yeah.
there's been so many of those that, yeah. I mean, I've had people be difficult, give me bad information, send me down the wrong roads, not care about communicating. I've missed ferries for trips over to islands and things that were just I there's been so many of those that would be impossible to dig through them. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, if I can think of any as we're talking, I'll circle back.
Okay. Okay,
But
sounds good. Well, I I just think it's so impressive, man, like, the limited amount of horse hauling that I have like, obviously, like, the horses in our barn, we'll drive them to the show or whatever, but, within a certain radius, I'll go pick up colts or
yeah,
drop off a colt and charge people and just um, do more of the trainer thing than anything, and I'm like, it takes a s really patient person, I would imagine, to do this full time and deal with this stuff all the time. So that I applaud you for that, honestly,
patience
more than
does
anything.
help, and I do find it miraculous how many people who are working in this industry, whether they work as a driver or company owner, who lack that critical character component of patience, because it is important. But ultimately, like we're all on every things happen as they happen, kind of on the horse's schedule. So yeah, there is nothing worse though than you're trying to put a mixed load together to go on a long distance trip, and I kind of like to think of us like FedEx, like we've got a schedule to keep, and it's not so much that I have a schedule to keep because I need to get there at a certain time, but if I have an 8 horse trip to Florida with 5 pickups, every horse I pick up along the way adds time unnecessarily to that prior horse's trip. So customers who weren't ready, who don't really, it's not that I'm trying to prod people because I'm worried about my time, but every minute a horse spends on a truck unnecessarily could make just increase their possibility of getting shipping related illness that much more or whatever. So that's where my
Sure.
patience gets tested.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to pick your brain about that a little bit. Talk a little bit about kinda your standard procedure. Say you've got a long haul. Um, as far as what do the horses have available to them when you're hauling them? Like, how often are you stopping for the horses? How long are they staying on the trailer? Like, what are kind of your goals in terms of animal welfare for what they have available and how long they're going to be on there?
Well, one thing that we started doing when I got into shipping that really wasn't a common practice prior, and I'm not saying I invented it, I picked it up, but we hang water buckets for every horse on every trip, really over, say, 5 hours. And giving horses free choice water and free choice hay, it really makes them ship better to me. Like whether it's
Yeah,
my customers' horses that I take long distance or my own personal horses that I take long distance, they ship a lot better, healthier, happier when they've got free choice hay and water. So that's kind of a given on any of my trips, long distance. I've got some little tricks that I like to do in the trailer that make horses trips a little better. We'll maybe start out with the horse's head tie a little tighter, depending on sort of their behavior and the horse next to them if they have a horse next to them, and I'll take chest bars down after a certain amount of time. I've this analogy. It's like training fleas. You put fleas in a jar and they'll jump out. But if you put fleas in a jar and cover it with cellophane, they'll jump up and they'll hit that cellophane. And pretty soon they'll jump up, but they'll jump shy of that cellophane. So in the commercial vans, a chest bar to me is kind of like that cellophane. So we'll get to a certain point on the long trips, especially the Florida trips, where we might pull chest bars down because giving a horse the ability to lower its head, to drain, I never really understood that it's basically to drain that like the nasal discharge and the ability to cough is
Mm,
greatly increased by not having something in front of them. Like in a slant load trailer, you really don't have that unless there's a manger. But even in like a 2-horse trailer or a regular head to head, there's always some sort of bar up front. So,
yeah,
to be really specifically answer your question, to some little tricks that we do regarding that, we've changed some angles on our head ties to keep to allow horses to lower their heads more, but to still keep them from being able to really fight with the horse next to them too much. So those are probably the biggest
yeah,
things. Climate control is a really big thing for me. Um, and that's something that I can't really explain succinctly. It's people will say, you got to give horses plenty of air. You do, but you also have to make sure they don't get. There is such thing as too cold. There is that perfect temperature. I want a horse trailer, and when it's hot out, it doesn't matter. The windows are all open, but as it cools off, nothing gets me more frustrated than when I see a commercial van pass me, and it happens quite a bit. It'd be 32 degrees out, all the windows are open, and you can look in the trailer. None of the horses are blanketed, and you can tell they're race horses or standardbreds or basically they're either clipped or short haired, and you just tell it's just not comfortable for the horse. So those are some of the things that we do specifically to make the trips better. Um, and then
yeah,
it's efficient, trying to be efficient, being efficient about your stops, trying not so much to limit your stops. It's like that. I think it was John Wooden. I was talking about him earlier. He had that saying, "Be quick, but don't hurry." You got to
hmm,
plan your stops a little bit where, if a 15-minute stop might be all you need, but you get stuck waiting in line at Wendy's. That 15-minute stop turns into 30, but then you find someone's blocked the parking lot. So now it's an hour. So you
yeah,
just have to be careful about the little things like that. And there's really no way to do that without getting some experience and learning how to
yeah,
avoid those kind of situations. So,
yeah, yeah.
um,
That's my favorite John Wooden quote
okay.
is "Be quick, but don't hurry."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Go ahead.
so can you talk a little bit that free choice water? Like obviously, like it comes to mind. Okay, I set them up with a water bucket. How does the water not like just
Oh,
spill all
it
over the
does. It makes
floor
a
of your
mess.
trailer?
And drivers, when we first started doing that in the early 2000s, drivers would complain, "Oh, it makes a mess and this, that," and they pee more. It's granted they're gonna, but that's a good thing. You want that. It just
Yeah.
it splashes a little bit, but you'd be surprised in an air-eyed commercial van how the spillage isn't anywhere nearly as bad as you might think it would be. So you may
Mm.
not fill the bucket to within an inch of the top, but having that water there and making sure you check your geometry of your head ties to make sure the horse can reach it because the horse can't reach it. You'd be surprised how many people might hang a bucket but don't realize that the horse can't actually get to it. So it's just
Yeah.
kind of some common sense there. But yeah,
Yeah. That's really interesting, all of that, but especially, the water and the chest bars and where you tie, because that again, all those little things make a big difference,
I can
and
tell you
that's
this
something.
just to go
Go
off on a
ahead.
tangent. Any any trailer any manufactured trailer that has the head tie ring, most trailers aren't sold with head ties. They have the D ring or a loop that's welded on. They're too high. Basically,
Mhm.
if that head tie ring is up at the roof radius of the trailer, so it's 7 or 8 feet off the ground, it's too high because you end up limiting the horse's range of motion down in order to achieve limiting their range of motion side to side. Does that make sense? Like even major
Mhm.
brand trailers, and I don't want to mention any because I don't want to get sued, but even the major brand trailers that I like, the goosenecks that I buy, I just retrofit the head ties lower because those head ties that are 7.5 feet off the ground, they're they don't allow they don't set things up the way I want them to, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you just what do you do? Unscrew them and put new holes?
Well, a lot of those are welded in, so we'll just add D-rings, whether we weld new D-rings in lower or in the commercial vans, we'll use just a simple like a stainless steel version of the 1-inch D-ring you might get at the local hardware store. But we
Uh-huh.
fasten them lower. I think I want to say like roughly 60 or 68 inches off the floor of the trailer is about where we like to do it because it sort of accommodates it's the best compromise between we might ship in the same stall a 12-hand pony, and then the next day it's an 18 two-hand horse, so we have to have the adaptability and adjustability to ship both of those sizes to the
Mhm.
effectively and in a way that doesn't cause them health problems.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, okay, what if well, I guess once you're in a slant load, you can one you probably have a manger underneath, so that changes things anyway. So like would you recommend people not do a long haul in like a slant load trailer with a manger where they can't get their head but so low?
I wouldn't be so bold as to think my opinion had enough weight to make a statement on that, but I would never own a slant load with a manger and ship big horses or bigger horses on a long trip because I do think it does I think it limits to a certain extent where that cutoff might be. I mean, there may be people out there going 24 hours without stopping with a trailer with a manger and they get along just fine. I don't know. I would be kind of
Sure.
surprising to me, but I don't know. I
Yeah.
definitely wouldn't hesitate to have a slant load with no manger and to make sure like you almost want a horse you want a horse to not be able to turn around, right? Like you want a horse to be restrained
Right.
enough that if they aren't broke to trailering per se like in a slant load, you want them to have enough restraint that they can't try to turn around and get themselves in a jam or get in a wreck. Um there's going to be some experimentation on everybody's part about where that the might be. With a big drop down door in front of a horse, it's hard to even figure where you might put a head tie in a slant load. When I ship my personal horses, I have a stock combo, like a living quarters trailer, and I have it so that they're tied short enough, but they can almost eat off the floor. It's got to be high enough to
Mm.
keep them from stepping over that lead because that's a problem, right? You don't want
Yeah.
that to happen, but low enough that they can almost like if I hang a hay net in a water bucket for them, but they pull enough hay out that it starts to pile up to say the knee level, they can still get at it, and they might start to eat off the floor, and that just kind of gets everything flowing better. Um, Probably ask a vet it's not so much it's just like any of that mucus, the stuff that can a buildup that they normally would cough out can I think lead to shipping fever, pneumonia, and lung
Mm.
problems. So I think
Dang.
if you're doing day trips, it's probably not that big a deal.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That well, and that makes sense too. But that's like I know a lot of people who are like we and I'm an example of this. Like we probably pretty much operate within like a 4 or 5 hour radius of where we live. Like that's a long
Yeah,
haul for us. Um, and then every now and then you'll get, we'll do a trip to like Oklahoma, and then it's like a 2 day trip where it's 2 8 hour days in a row or something like that
yeah.
for us.
You'd be surprised.
And
Those
so,
layover trips that you're talking about, they they really do. You can you can recover a horse quite a bit. There's a big difference in taking a horse from say where you are to say Oklahoma City if you do it on a layover versus if you did it straight through because they get so much opportunity in that stall at night to put their head down and to drink from the ground, to
mhm,
eat from the ground. Um, we don't really ever do layover trips, but part of that is just the liability and the extra the extra opportunity you might have to have horse catch something, an accident, whatever it may be, and than
mhm.
anything, where you are going even to Ocala. I mean, what's that like a 12-hour trip, 14-hour trip? it's a long,
Ocala is probably like 10,
long
11 hours in a horse
it's
trailer.
a
Yep.
long day trip, but I mean, that's you're not really gonna start to expose yourself to too many problems, really in any configuration with a trailer on a trip like that, as long as the horse you remember to open the windows, little stuff like
Yeah.
that, like
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
See, but that's priceless stuff because, man, I'm a horse trainer. I'll tell you this right now. Someone who's just a layperson getting into horses, they might ask um, they'll ask their farrier about the hoof advice, and they'll ask their veterinarian, and they'll ask their trainer about like, well, what do I do when he does this? But the ability to talk to someone with the experience that you have about shipping horses, which is a major pain point for a lot of people.
well, it's what
Like
allowed
that's
it's what allows me to have a business. We're like a necessary evil.
yeah.
We're definitely
Yeah.
that thing you outsource if you can.
Yeah.
Not I shouldn't say it quite
Mhm.
like that because it can be enjoyable experience to take your horse to a show yourself, but for a lot of what we do, it's it's something that everybody would much rather not do themselves. But yeah, you're
For
right. I hear
sure.
a lot of bad. I hear some good advice given, but there's really not a great resource for people that I know of to get advice on trailering. Um, there's some really good fundamentals that I could tell anybody that wanted to know, and something as simple as ultimately you want the horse to have a good experience. Like most
Mhm.
horses will get on a trailer once. Every horse will get on a trailer a second time if that was a good experience the first time. So
Yeah.
if you're, you know, and it is shocking to me I might ride with someone that I've never driven with before, not even in horse transportation. They might be giving me a ride to the airport. I'm like, man, you're a horrible driver. Just, like in and out of the brakes and accelerating and swerving. And it's like that person might own a horse trailer and may not realize that that horse is standing up behind them. It's not like like something you're tying down. It's not like you went to the store and bought a pallet or whatever and put a ratchet strap over the top and it's secured. It's basically standing on the ground on four legs. Yes, it has basically 4 points of balance, but you go stand on anything and it's like being in a pickup bed when someone takes off. You have to brace for it. And horses don't know when that is coming. So they do have an advantage with
Mhm.
having front hind feet, but I like to one of the things I tell my anybody that's starting out driving for me or really anybody else that'll listen is think of it like put a soda can on the dash. Open a soda can, put it on the dash, and drive like you don't want it to spill.
Mhm.
Granted, it's not really possible with the road's not smooth or someone cuts you off, but that would be your goal is to just have it as
Yeah.
smooth as possible.
Yeah.
It's a pretty
The
specific
best
thing.
No, go ahead. Go
So
ahead.
hopefully that kind of gives you that's probably the best advice that I could give somebody about driving horses. I've had people call me with questions like, "Hey, should I feed my horse coastal hay on a trip? I read in some magazine you shouldn't feed coastal when you ship." And it's like there's a lot of really specific things that I may not be that well schooled on that I'm not qualified to give advice on. But yeah,
Yeah. No, that makes because there's a lot of that type of stuff out there. Like feed alfalfa when you ship because it moves through them better, and I've heard a lot of stuff like that that I don't know if it's better or worse.
yeah. I mean, horses that don't travel a lot or really ever that do get trailered, they're going to have some natural stress, right? It's just a part. It's like tying your horse up to the side of the barn or it's outside when they're not used to it. They're gonna be stressed. So the more they do
Mhm.
it, the less stress they'll get as long as the experience is good. Like I circling back to hanging water buckets and keeping a hay net in front of a horse that they're not going to put a front foot through that's hung at the right height gives them something to do. It just makes the experience a little better. Yeah, it may not be like the cowboy way of doing things, but yeah, circling back, you want it to be a good experience.
Yep, for sure. I remember the advice I got that changed my perspective on shipping horses, which I had done like all my life, like since I had a learner's permit because I was just a ranch kid, right?
Yeah,
So it was just been driving stock trailers around everywhere. Um, it, they said Well, when you ride your horse, you know, you try to feel all 4 feet underneath you, right? And feel what those 4 feet are
Yeah.
doing. It's like, yeah, okay. So say you got 2 horses in the back of your truck right there. Like when you drive and you're stopping and turning and all and hitting the accelerator, I want you to through those pedals, I want you to try to feel all 8 of those feet. See if you can feel those feet. And if you're really like thinking about that, you end up driving, in my experience, you end up driving really smooth. It's kind of the same as that Coca-Cola bottle
Yeah.
analogy, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good way of looking at it, especially because if you accelerate too much in a turn, you're only gonna feel what would effectively be the outside, your 4 tires on the outside, because that's where you're putting all the
Yeah.
weight, and then your horse is going into that wall, whatever wall is
Mhm.
closest to that side. So, no, that's a good analogy.
Yeah. Yeah. What about another thing, especially with the show horses and the long hauls? I don't know if you have opinions on this, but a hot button issue is ulcers and ulcer prevention on stuff like that. Do you have any thoughts? Maybe even if it's just like on your personal horses with these long
I
hauls?
think I'll come right out and say that I'm probably not qualified to talk about that enough because I don't quite understand the the I know there are medications that can be given. You know, my wife will give a horse, what's it called, Gastrogard or something, or a generic version or
Mhm.
whatever, before certain trips or events. Um, I think of that might be better qualified to talk about it. I partly because
Sure.
I'm under the impression that maybe some of that stuff takes quite a bit of time to work. Like if you give a horse some sort of ulcer preventive before it gets on my truck, that's probably a good thing, provided that it works in the time frame that they're on my trailer. So if you're giving
Right.
them something that takes 32 hours to work and they're going on an 8-hour trip, I don't know how effective it is. So
Mhm.
I don't know. It's most of the I can't really I don't have a strong opinion on that or really an educated opinion on that to talk about it.
Sure. And that's fair enough because I feel the same way. I get those questions from
And tell you what,
clients, and I'm not a veterinarian.
if you're a horse owner with one horse and you're going somewhere, that horse is probably going to be stressed out on the trailer. But if it's comfortable being somewhere by itself, not on the trailer, you're doing yourself way more of a service getting that box checked than you are worrying about like an ulcer preventive. So a horse that
Yeah.
kind of is content being tied anywhere or to the side of the trailer and is probably going to be much more content being by itself on the trailer. And that might require
Mhm.
a little work on the horse owner's part.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
again,
That makes
giving
a lot of
giving
sense.
them a good experience in the trailer. You know, there's you see people that they're driving down the road with a slant load, that they got the side door down and the horse's head sticking out. You know, yeah, if a bee flies in their eye at 60 miles an hour, are you giving them a good experience? Are you really making it very a positive thing? You know, so
Yeah.
think about it from that perspective. Since things that
Yeah.
seem obvious to me just growing up around horses, I think it would be tough for me to kind of talk about every one of them. But I see things and I'm saying, "Ah, this doesn't even make, why would someone not know better than that? You know?" So
Yeah. Oh, I totally get that, man. I totally agree. But it's tough, and I think I made this analogy on the show before, but it's like getting into horses is like all these little unwritten things. Like it's so hard for people to like you can't sit down and read the manual on fully being a horse owner. And people have tried to write it, but it just doesn't exist and you kind of have to live in the world and experience it and do all these things. Um
well, that's
but
the thing
yeah,
is you're right, but that's
it's
where
tough.
having a trainer or like it might not even be a trainer you board with, but someone that you can be associated with to sort some of that stuff out for you is really helpful. You know,
Amen.
and
Amen.
I'm not out here to advocate I'm sure there's as much bad advice out there as there is good advice, but you know, just find someone that's got some runs on the board that you know is going to give you good, honest advice and doesn't necessarily have everything they tell you a financially vested interest in what they're telling you, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's wise. Um, so one of the last things I wanted to touch on, you know, you kind of told us the story. You're building this business, you're working, you're doing the thing. Um, you're living in the horse world and you're on the road. You kind of got like the gypsy lifestyle going a little bit and you're like, I'll go wherever. Um, talk a little bit like how'd you manage to pin down a wife, man?
Well, it's a
Like
good question.
doing
So
all that.
I have a pretty good hook with that story. Probably should have led in with that and maybe kept people's attention a little better. I met my wife at a truck stop. Um, I was coming out of Wellington, Florida with a load of horses. The day before I was leaving, somebody called me, one of my customers in Aiken, South Carolina, and said they needed to get a horse back to Boston, the Boston area. And I wasn't going to take a full load of horses out of Wellington. Really, I try not to go to Aiken coming out of Wellington because it just makes for a little bit too long of a trip. But I called a friend of mine who said, "Oh, I know a lady in Aiken who will run that horse out to the highway for you." And that's something we do quite a bit in our business. I try to always hire another commercial shipper to get this done. In this particular case, it was in 2011, and I didn't do that. But this lady brings this horse out to meet us in St. George, South Carolina, right off of 95, and and it was an Australian lady, and she had a girl with her, gal with her, and I said something to the lady, and we were, rolling the cocoa mat out, doing whatever we were doing with the ramp, and I looked over, and the gal that was riding with the driver said something. I said, "Oh, well, tell your mom such and such," and then she looked at me funny, and long story short, I realized it wasn't this gal's mom, and she was just kind of along for the ride, and loaded the horse and exchanged pleasantries with him, and then took off, and didn't think a whole lot of it, except that gal that was riding along was cute, pretty. I'm gonna step on my tongue here, but someone that I would have wanted to see again. And I can be somewhat shy, and but in this particular case, I wasn't. And so I called the guy that had arranged for things the day before, giving me this lady's number, and I said, "Hey, who was that girl that I met that would have been with the original person was Jenny. My wife's name's Julie. Who was the gal that was with Jenny when she brought the horse out from Macon?" And oh, that's Julie. And so, you think you could get me your phone number? And I got her phone number and I asked her out on a date. And no, it's not just not my mo. And it's funny because she just walked up as I'm telling the story. And but I ended up meeting her and went on a few more dates, and one thing led to another. She's Australian herself, and she ended up
Mm,
moving here in like 2012, and that's just here we are. So
wow.
yeah, so I met my
Wow,
wife at a
that's
truck stop.
awesome. That's
Yeah,
like a meant to be type story, huh?
yeah, 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 for
Yeah,
sure. So met my wife at a truck stop.
really cool.
Yeah.
So, okay, so then kind of the last thing I wanted to hit on, um, like, where did all these, like, trips to Nevada? Because you 'Cause you're kinda into the, like, big loop roping, like, bridle horse
Well,
stuff,
I'd like to
and
say,
nothing we've talked about
yeah.
has really, like, offered why you would ever be interested in any of that stuff, you know?
Well, growing up, I always really all I ever wanted to be growing up was a cowboy. But growing up in Massachusetts, it really wasn't an option. The closest thing I could ever get to that, and it's interesting. Your question about how I met my wife plays directly into this. All I ever wanted to do was really cowboy, but riding with a reining horse trainer growing up was as close to cowboying as I could ever get. I kind of got out of horses a little bit in my later teens, and my saddle horse as a kid ended up going into the family lesson program. Went to college here and then met my wife. And once things got serious with she and I, she's a horse person. She came here to work in the horse industry. She was a chemist in Australia, she had like a real job, and kind of got burned out and moved here to do some training to go home. But once we got together, I realized maybe it was time to get a horse. So, but even before that, I kind of had an obsession as a kid with slick fork saddles, and back east they just weren't a thing. I remember saying something to my trainer as a kid about, "Oh man, I'd really like to get one of those." "Yeah, you can't get one of those narrow things, a sore horse, and this, that, and the other." So I figured, well, what the heck? I've got enough money at this point in my life. I can sell my old swell fork and look for a slick fork saddle. And in the process of doing that, I ended up on. I don't know how much time we have. This is the long format of this story, but I
Go
ended up
for
on
it.
the Billings livestock sale uh, website. And long story short, I ended up flying to Billings. I bought a horse out of the sale. Probably had no business buying the horse out of the sale. Like, was not that broke a horse. It was not the kind of horse they're selling at Billings today. This was back in 2013, and he was basically the guy had used the horse as a pack horse and in a feed yard a little bit. And I did end up at one point getting a slick fork saddle, and always growing up, I had read this magazine called Cowboy Magazine. It was a really small circulation publication out of Colorado Springs, and it was full of ads from those like sort of bridle horse type stuff and stories from people who worked on big ranches in the West, and it always kind of hooked me. And it had been enough of a pause in my life that I'd forgotten about it. But when I started to dive back in the advent of the internet, you know, everything's within a mouse click. So I was able to really rekindle an interest in that stuff, and I realized, like, I wanted to learn to rope. You know, I roped a lot as a kid around the farm, and everywhere I went, I'd have a rope in my hand, rope the dog. We had a POA pony that ran loose on the farm as a kid. I'd rope that, rope my buddies, whatever I could, but I never tied it in with actually riding a horse. Um, so one thing led to another, and I met the lady who is Martin Black's photographer at a ranch horse show in New Hampshire. And she stuck out to me because I had been looking at all those Mary Williams Hyde photos that are on her website. And she takes a lot of photos in that like Southeast Oregon, Northern Nevada area. And this lady at this show looked just like the people I'd been seeing in these photos. So after she did her round and was back at her trailer, I was there with my wife and my in-laws were there from Australia. I went up and introduced myself and sort of got to be friends with her. And one thing led to another. And I had an opportunity to go to Nevada in 2017. Martin Black ran a ranch school at a place called Hot Creek, which is would be northeast of Tonopah, Nevada, which I think would be like way northeast of where you've been over in Dyer.
Mhm.
So I got to go for 2 weeks to this ranch school and really like I got to go gather big country, brand calves, and I mean the hook was set at that point. And I made friends with the couple of people that worked at that ranch and the ranch owner, and basically got told I could come back anytime and help them outside of the clinic. You know, I didn't need basically anybody's. The Martin Black deal was I couldn't go back during the clinic, but I could go back anytime outside of that and get to sort of practice some of the stuff we learned. And that's what I did. I went back in the fall of 2017 and helped them gather and wean, and then went back in the spring for another couple of weeks as part of that clinic. And then that fall of 2018, I managed at great expense to my financial solvency and my company's stability. I went out for 6 weeks and I worked for those guys. I worked with those guys to gather and wean, and about the end of that, I realized I'd sort of outgrown. I don't want to say outgrown, but I was starting to hit the limits of what I was able to learn there.
Yep.
In that time frame, I'd gotten to know a guy named Dwight Hill, and I'd bought a saddle horse from him, a really nice broke saddle horse from him that I could do a cowboy job on, and he was safe, he was big, and I said to Dwight, I said, Dwight, hey, where can I go? I've kind of outgrown this place. I want to start being around more traditional, like ranch ropers, you know, essentially buckaroo types. And one thing led to another. He set me up with some folks you've had on your show, Scott and Andrea Van Leuven at the Sea Punch. And I ended up going to the Sea Punch in the spring of 2019 and working for them for like a month. And that's just
Mm.
that sort of, I don't want to say it got the ball rolling, but that's where I started to get really step outside that comfort zone. That was like getting dropped into the deep end of the pool, you know, for a guy from back
Yeah.
east who really didn't have much experience, limited experience in Nevada, limited experience around cattle, had some pretty good fundamentals that I'd learned at that ranch school from the start of being able to read a cow and that sort of thing. And it's just one thing has led to another with getting to know people in that community and getting to spend more time out there.
Yeah. That's really cool, man. That's pretty unique that, you know uh, get I you know, it's the 95 corridor, right?
Yeah.
Like the hunter jumper world runs through the 95
Yep.
corridor, all the way up and down the East Coast. And so for you to spend the majority of your life in that world and then get the opportunity and just like do those things and take advantage of that as much as you've been able to,
Yeah.
it's really impressive.
Well, I've been really lucky that I would never have been able to do that earlier in life and still start and run my business. But the sort of the drive and the hook that the focus and the interest I had in starting and running a horse transportation at the beginning, I felt that when I got around the ranching community and doing that cowboy job later in life. And that's, I think I'm probably unfortunately as interested in that and developing myself in that sort of ability as anything, you know? So we've had some
Yeah,
conversations about
that's
a few
cool.
brief conversations about starting colts and whatnot. And that's something I'm trying to now learn because like I knew if I was going to go out to cowboy, I had to learn to shoe a horse. And growing up, shoeing a horse was kind of a job for a farrier. But every horse trainer that I ever rode with, the reining horse trainer I grew up with, they could shoe their own horse. And I was in my early 30s and I didn't know how. And I'm like, I needed to learn that. So I learned how to do that. And now kind of starting your own colts, shoeing your own horses is kind of like just a given if you're gonna try to be in the
Mhm,
cowboy world at all, even as a guest,
for sure.
So yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's awesome, man. That's really cool. And it's cool. That's how we got in touch, right? Was just mutual friends from
yeah,
you being
yeah,
in that world and
yep.
everything. Um, man, I yeah, I think you're you've lived a very unique life, man. And
Thank you.
it's been fun to visit with you about it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I could probably make a whole nother show. You asked me what I had for stories about trucking, and I think they've all just kind of gotten jumbled in the mix. But I could probably make a whole nother show out of my cowboying stories. It's definitely become a passion and an interest, and sort of it's all consuming at this point. So
Yeah.
we had a
Heck yeah.
friend of mine came from Nevada to do some part-time driving for me, and but I flew him in a day early so we could go castrate a few bull calves that I have on a lease pasture down here, and we got to head and heel and trying to just do little bits here and there where I can. Stuck
Yeah.
3,000 miles away from where the center of that community is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, at least and I don't know, I'm not very familiar with Wellington. And it's a different deal for sure. But it's not like there's a lack of cattle in Florida.
No,
So,
you're right. I have had the opportunity to do a few different like, to go to a few different places in Florida, but I can't speak for where you are, your country, as they say out west, but, the way they do things down here, it's just once you've been out there and handled cattle, worked cattle, it's everything here is, it's dogs, it's calf tables, it's there's
mhm,
not the pressure and relief and the art of stockmanship that I've gotten to get a glimpse of being in Nevada and
for
Idaho
sure.
and Eastern Oregon and whatnot.
Yep. Yeah, I totally understand that. Totally get that. So, um, well, before we wrap up here today, Charlie, you've for people who've been listening, Holly Horse Transport has been sponsoring some of the podcast episodes. Um, do you want to just again plug your business as far as if people want to use you as a shipper, or I know last time we talked, you're still looking to hire good people to
Yeah, I think
become
one of the goals I
reliable
had
horse
in
shippers.
trying to get the word out through your podcast was I do use quite a few, I say quite a few, a handful of part-time people, and you don't have to
Hmm.
live close by. I mean, like I said, I flew a friend in from Nevada to help me for a week, and so as long as someone, it's commercial CDL work. It's a semi truck and trailer, so a CDL driver who's got horse experience, who's interested in um in trying something different, even if it's for just a weekend or a week here and there or a month during our busy season. I'd be interested in talking to them.
Yeah. Heck yeah. Awesome. And for everyone listening, what's the best way to find your business or get a hold of you guys or anything?
I'm stuck in the dark ages a little bit by choice. We have a company Facebook page. I don't do any booking of work through that. Um, I strictly use that for sort of the feel good photos of a truck here and there and whatnot. Call the office, you can message our Holly Hill Transport Facebook page. I'll give somebody my phone number. Calling is the best way to go about it if someone's interested in learning more. I hmm, tend to procrastinate. I think through the sponsorship, I actually have a link to like a uh, help wanted type page on our website that I haven't actually got the web designer, the content to finish yet. So I don't have a lot that's easily accessed, at any point to give information about it. But yeah,
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, for everyone listening, don't forget to like and subscribe and follow the On the Move podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all those things. Keep this show running. Keep great people like Charlie coming on the show. And yeah, for everyone listening, we'll see you guys in a couple weeks. Charlie, thanks for coming on the show.
thank you.